Hello everybody, it is Julie. Welcome back to Pages and Pens. Today I am here with my reread of The House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski. Let's jump right into it. I read House of Leaves originally in 2018, and it was an undertaking. I was really nervous about it. It's a mixed media, very intense, very dense book. Recently, when I read this the first time, I did annotate and highlight it, but I didn't tab it. So I went through and I've tabbed up everything in orange. I annotated in orange my first read through. This time around, I have green and a quote from The Labyrinth, because there's a labyrinth in this book. This is a large buddy read on Twitter with the hashtag, and then there will be a live show. You're definitely seeing this before the live show. No way I don't read this sooner than the 2 weeks that we're allotting to read this book. So hyped to reread this book. It is one of the most well-crafted, chilling, anxiety-inducing books I've ever read. It's one of the first instances where I saw mixed media used to heighten a reader's anxiety, tension, own feelings of paranoia and psychosis. It is so amazing. And I am noticing new things about it already, just in my flip through really quickly, and I'm just going to walk you through a couple of the things that I see. But just know, if you're watching this, it will be spoilery because this is a reread and I'm going to be discussing the book in detail, and then we will be also discussing it in the live show when we have that on the 29th. So know that ahead of time. If you haven't read House of Leaves, I highly recommend that you read this book. I also do think that reading it during a buddy read is the way to go, because then you're able to discuss it with other people in the community and kind of hash out details, because there's a lot of decoding and different things that you need to do for this book. Gosh, guys, it's going to be a ride. Here we go. Full color edition. In this, I was just looking over this page with Amber. There's so many details. We have a staircase that just descends into nothing. We have a little bit of the movie reel. We have a compass, which doesn't work in the house. We have measuring tapes when they're measuring out the house. We have a labyrinth that's hidden down here. Blood splatter, Poe stamps. This note is terrifying. Now, there are multiple editions of this book. This book specifically has the word house in blue, minotaur and struck through passages in red, and then their only struck through line in chapter 21 appears in purple, and then there's color plates and different things, but some are in 2 colors, some are in black and white, some are incomplete and don't have certain aspects. So this is the version I have, but there are others. In the foreword, which I just read recently, now, says the first edition of House of Leaves was distributed privately, did not contain chapters 21, appendix 2, 3, or the index. Every effort has been made to provide appropriate translations and accurately credit all sources. If they failed, they will gladly correct subsequent printing errors and omissions that are brought to their attention. I don't even know if that's real, or if this is a part of the whole premise of this book. From the get-go, I don't know if I can trust this, because this is a book inside of a book. It is a movie inside of a book. It is a whole interwoven thing. So, I don't even know if that's necessarily true. And then we get to the first page of text, which is just, this is not for you, which is haunting in its own right. And then we have an introduction. This introduction, this first sentence, I still get nightmares. In fact, I get them so often, I should be used to them by now. I'm not. No one ever really gets used to the nightmares. Can I highlight and annotate an entire book? Because I feel like that's the point I'm going to get to with this book. I love it so much. I am so ready to dive back in. I am still in the introduction. One of the most ominous things that he does is a lot of foreshadowing. And because this book is not linear, he's able to do that in a way that really layers the story. So the foreword is by our narrator, who finds all of this footage and finds all this information about the house and then tells it to us. The book is credited and written by Zampano, who is this 80-year-old man who compiled all of this information, and then it is found, and it says, I should have at the very least sensed the consequences lingering in the air. I must have been some kind of moron to have been so oblivious to all the signs. The way that Lude's keys rattled like the bone chimes when he opened the main gate. The way we padded down the dank hallway buried in shadows. probably most important of all, the way that Lude whispered when he told me things I couldn't have given a damn about back then, but now my nights would be a great deal shorter if I didn't have to remember them. Ever see yourself doing something in the past and no matter how many times you remember it, you still want to scream, stop, somehow redirect the action, and reorder the present? My guess now is that he sealed his apartment in an effort to retain the various emanations of his things and himself. Reams and reams, endless snarls of words branching off into other pieces. Even without touching it, you began to feel its heaviness. I felt a certain resolute blackness was capable of anything, maybe even of slashing out, tearing up the floors, murdering him, murdering us, maybe even murdering you. And I misspoke. Though it says it's a second edition, this is a first edition book. And I don't know if there's actually other editions at all, period. Published in 2000 by Mark Z. Danielewski. We know that this was published by Random House. We're told here that it's by the man in the book, forward by the man who's narrating, and that it's published by Pantheon Books in New York, and that it's a second edition. Because the first edition is just the loose ramblings of this man, who's then edited by this man. Even the book on the side says Pantheon Books, even though it's a Penguin Random House book. So, I believe that this page and this is actually a mock thing, and that even though this says it is not a first edition because it has first edition crossed out, I believe this is still a first edition because this is a 2000 release and this is a 2000 book. I believe this is in reference to like other versions of the book that actually aren't other versions of the book. I am at this point now done the forward, and we jump into our first page, which has plenty of footnotes and annotations and like, see page such and such, which is why this book is impossible to read linearly. It's not feasible. I'm on page 11. Yes, it's been 2 hours and I'm on page 11, but I've been trying to really dive deep into all of the footnotes and little side notes just to make sure that I'm not missing anything that adds to the book, because I have already found a note on the very last page of this book that does tie into things that are already happening. So I'm like trying to be really critical about my reading. What I have noticed is that there's articles referenced. In one situation on page 11, they're referencing an article called The Heart's Device in Science Magazine, volume 265 from August 5th, 1994, page 741. And then it also says jewelry box, perfume, and hair, and like all this other stuff. So like, here's the thing. That article doesn't exist. That issue exists. Published on that date, that page exists, but it does not have that particular article on it. In the book, it's referencing him throwing away a clump of her hair from a brush, like he cleans her hair out of a brush and throws it away. The actual article that resides on that page is about DNA sequencing of hair found in archaeological digs to get DNA. So it ties in. But is it necessary to go research that article and that issue to figure that out? No. Is it an extra layer and an extra detail? Yes. Can you lose yourself in the footnotes and can it be very distracting and overwhelming? Absolutely. I don't think you need to look that deeply into each and every one of them. Some of them do have little nuggets, like we are referencing different videos, the 5.5 minute hallway. There's another one, Exploration Number 4. You can find fan mock-ups of those on YouTube, which I have watched, but for the most part, things like that, I think can kind of be left. You gauge how you want to read, but personally, you can definitely lose yourself in that kind of information. So I tend to just kind of charge forward. I forgot to update you last night when I finished reading, but I got 40 pages in. The orange tabs are the ones that I had from before. The green tabs are my new tabs. Here's the thing. Things are happening in the house. I am not a brave woman. I am not a woman who has a tolerance for bullshit, especially like paranormal bullshit where I feel threatened and or things are just like way too sketch. They went to a wedding, came back, and there's a mysterious hallway between their room and the kids' room. Like a door appeared in both bedrooms that connects both bedrooms without going out to the hallway. We have a bookshelf that was custom made to directly touch a wall, like wall to wall, and now there's like a gap. Like there's just, things are happening, and the kids are playing in like mysterious places, and they're fine with this apparently. He drills holes through the whole house to measure the interior space of the house versus the exterior space of the house to find it's like a 1/4 inch difference. Then they actually like measure again with lasers, I think, and it's 5/16 of an inch of a difference. I get it. The outside should match the inside, but like it's a negligible little tiny gap. But technically the inside of the house is larger than the outside of the house, which is weird. I would move. I'd move immediately. Like I would leave immediately. The beginning pages of this are very, very dense. They're very info heavy. The pace definitely starts to pick up when more of like the mixed media comes in. I did have like an appendix and a couple different times where I stopped to research stuff. My fear is that I know the first time I read this, I like sped through some of the tenser parts of this book without necessarily looking at the footnotes as much. I want to make sure that I'm doing that a little bit more as I go into the second reading. Also, there's a note in here, and I finally reached it. In the footnotes that I wanted to point out. On page 31, where Johnny says, if there's something you find irksome, go ahead and skip it. I couldn't care less how you read any of this. I've come to believe errors, especially written errors, are often the only markers left by a solitary life. To sacrifice them is to lose the angles of personality, the riddle of the soul. In this case, a very old soul and a very old riddle. Basically, there's no one way to read this. There's no way to read this identically 2 times in a row. Like, you're going to read this different every time that you read this. I noticed things already that I didn't notice the first time, like the fact that I knew Tom was Navy, Will's brother. Did not realize it was a twin. It's a fraternal twin. I did not remember that. So I marked it this time around. It's 11 o'clock and I am gonna read something else for a little bit, I think, because reading this too close to bed is not conducive to a great night of sleep. So I did read more of House of Leaves tonight. I am now on page 74. Did I read for multiple hours? Yes. Am I still on page 74 from 40? Yeah, because I got the fun footnote to look at letters from Johnny's mother, which is 57 pages worth of letters from his mother in weird ramblings and notes and somewhat coherent and phrases in different languages that I looked up, and a letter that I had decoded last time. This is the original, like, annotations. So, like, I originally decoded this letter, which is that every word in the sentence spells out another word. So, like, T-H-E-A-T, like, so, like, the attendants do it, is this one. And then in this section, I realized there's capitalized words in the middle, with capitals in the middle of words. And the capital letters in the middle of these words spell out a face in a cloud, no trace in the crowd. I don't think it means anything, to be completely honest. But I'm still confused by this page. Page 633. If anybody has notes on this. I'm trying to do what I can without looking up too many, like, Reddit threads, because then you just lose yourself forever. But I did get through her letters, which was 57 pages. This is a list of photographers, and it spans multiple pages. Multiple pages of photographers. Great, right? Except every surname, so every last name, it started to spell stuff out. So it's like a long list of visionaries, but the F and the O was missing. A long list of visionaries. Salute. She said, memories mean all, but they are all dead. Who? You. I wait now only for the wind. You could read it way faster than I am if you don't care to look at everything as deeply as I am, or because I know the overarching story, I'm choosing to take a little bit of time to just look a little bit deeper into things. It's been a few days. I didn't read for a little bit. But that's fine. Still have plenty of time to finish. We have the team of Holloway and Wax and Jeb, and they're there and they're exploring the limitless hallway, right? So they're going down and they're exploring. I think they're on exploration number 4 right now, which is, I think they're like 8 days in. Navy has not been back in since he went in just briefly. This other team has been exploring for a while, and he's getting ready to go back in because he heard the knocks of the SOS. Holloway just went rogue and started shooting and shot Wax, and doesn't want to go back up. Get him back out to safety because he doesn't want to go to jail. We also get Johnny just losing his marbles, banging it out with a lot of chicks right now. I don't know if I just like skipped over some stuff, but like I definitely don't remember him getting like a oiled finger up the booty hole in any of his sexual conquests. I knew that he was like hot for Thumper. That I remember, which is so pathetic. But then he's like banging all these other chicks, like randomly, very high, very drunk. And he's definitely starting to spiral. You're seeing that a lot more, but he hasn't had like another one of his like visioning nightmares where he feels the walls closing in or the beast on his back or anything like that. But it's just very difficult. It's very difficult to tolerate. I'm kind of in that phase of paranoia where I know everything means something. So I'm looking at like every tiny little thing, or I'm trying to, and I'm spending, I think, a little bit more time on these threads and these like, not conspiracy theories, but these like theories about the book that people have while reading it that they put into this thread and this community. I'm looking at it and I'm going, maybe there is something more to be seen there. And I could either spend 2 hours trying to figure it out, or I could go Google it and look it up on this website. And then I'm choosing to just go look it up on the website, but then I kind of like lose myself in it as well, and in what people think it may or may not mean. Things from here are going to start to go a lot faster. Just shy of 300 pages in. The book is 709 pages, so I'm still not halfway through the book, although a large part of it is the appendix and the indexes at the back. However, there is still something quasi-important on page 709, so definitely read to the end. I'm in the trenches, my friends, at the part of the book where we're getting a lot of large pages that you fly through very quickly because there's like 1 or 2 words on each page, and there really is a tense kind of anxiety and speed that is created through the way that the book is written. And at the same time, things really amp up in the house for Navy and his crew. You're getting this descent by Johnny into more and more madness, where he's starting to kind of like come off of drugs and alcohol for a little bit, but he's starting to lose time. He's starting to lose his grip on reality. You're starting to see his researching the house kind of take over his mind and take over his psyche. So while things are escalating in the house, things are escalating with Johnny's mental health. So both timelines are really in this high state of anxiety and unsuredness and unreliable narration and fear. It lends to a very anxious reading experience. It is not an easy reading experience, but I do want to comment on a couple of things because the foreshadowing that I'm seeing this time around, the treatment of Tom, his vlogs, kind of while he's up waiting for Navy and Reston while they go down to look for Holloway and his team and Wavy and Jed, the chaos, the anxiety, the fear that he's feeling, how sweet he's being with Karen, how much he's putting himself in like very anxious, stressful situations because he loves his brother and wants to be able to be there for his brother. And then you do get a passage where it's talking about the editing of this part of the video and this part of the movie and how Navidson himself has edited this segment months later, and it says, no doubt what would take place next deeply influenced the way he treated the material. It says it's the labor of love. If sorrow is deep regret over someone loved, there is nothing but regret here. I liked Tom in the first read through, and I still like him now. We do have two very different kinds of people in Navy and his timeline, and in Johnny and his timeline. So Johnny is our narrator. He is doing all the footnotes. He has compiled all of this research. He has taken Zampano's notes and made this book. It is Johnny's journey. So Zampano gathered all of this. Johnny found it. He is putting together Zampano's book that he never finished. While I love Navy's timeline, Johnny and his footnotes had really become a secondary, almost obnoxious deterrent from the main timeline that I wanted to read about, which was the house. The house is definitely thrilling and exciting, but I know a lot of people get frustrated with the footnotes, and I do feel like the footnotes are really important in trying to get you into the right mindset of just the research of this house, just looking into all this information, just following the spiral of putting together and compiling all this information, causing this delirium and paranoia and lapses in time, and the way that they directly kind of break the wall and talk to the reader and say, listen, you think nothing's going to happen to you, but like beware, because the same thing's probably going to happen to you once you lose yourself in this house. And I've seen it on the threads as I look through and try to research, like, does this code mean something? Is there a hidden message on this page that I should know about? There are threads and sites dedicated to this book, people who inspect every single word. You can lose yourself in this book and in this house and in this world. So while I can still enjoy the timeline of the house more, I respect Johnny's timeline in a second reading a lot more. But I will also say that his lifestyle is very drug-induced, it is alcohol-induced, and it is sex-induced. It is very heavy on unhealthy things, on very, very poor self-care practices. There is a section that I wanted to address because it's vulgar and pretty god-awful, where we go over everybody that Lude has slept with in a month. So it's Lude's list for November on page 262, where he categorizes each person he slept with, their age, and then like a little bit about their sexual encounter. And then on the following page, there's a secondary breakdown of that list by name and like what their deal was, I guess. Like, but a lot of this is sexual assault, sexual abuse, rape, pedophilia, incest, and like severe trauma. And what I don't appreciate is kind of the insinuation that because of this trauma that was experienced by these characters, they are then dancers. Like, because it says, like, this person was a dancer, had sex with her at, like, a club or something, and then it says that she was, like, molested by her mother at a young age. So there's insinuations there, you know, like, a misrepresentation of trauma leading to, maybe not a misrepresentation, but an unhealthy correlation between trauma and sexual promiscuity. Don't love that for this book. There is definitely a treatment of women, and in that timeline, in Johnny's timeline, more by Lude than by him, but still not acceptable. There's also a situation of incredible animal abuse. Now, in the beginning of this book and throughout this book, there is still this theme of like these disappearing cats, but you don't get actual like on-screen violence about the cats. However, there is a situation on page 267 that is just full-blown animal abuse, animal death, cruelty to animals that is like staggering. Again, because Johnny is descending into this like unfit state of mind. You don't know if this is true or not, but it reads like it is, and it's very disturbing. And the fact that that is discussed at the same time you're getting Tom's vlogs and his care and concern for Karen and the kids, and what's happening outside of him, and his care for his brother, and him putting himself in harm's way because of his brother. At the same time, you're getting this really gruesome, gory, explicit scenes from Johnny is very off-putting. And that's all a part of the plan. That's all a part of Danielewski's intent in this section. A lot of anxiety and a lot of tension and a lot of emotions that you feel as a reader. The scenes with like door slamming, one after another, and the pages read of slam, 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 and you're just turning pages as these doors slam and you're wondering what's about to happen. It's incredible. It's brilliant writing. And while I can see that there's a ton of different ways to read this book, and you can do as much or as little as you want in the reading experience by way of research and code breaking, I found more codes in this the second time reading than I did the first time reading. I've definitely taken away a lot more from it this time around. There's so much nuance and so much woven through this, and so much that you think this has to mean something, and then you can research it for days and maybe it doesn't. But it adds to that building anxiety and tension of like not knowing what's real and what's important and what's not. You can see why Johnny would start to descend. And you can see why Navy and Reston and Wavy and Jed and Holloway and Karen, you can see why they would just descent into madness. It's been a couple days, friends. I'm on page 370. This book only actually goes to page 528, and then it's appendixes. So like I've got a tiny chunk left, but the bulk of like the house is done. Karen is editing the film. She's talking to filmmakers and architects and psychiatrists and Stephen King and Anne Rice and journalists and all these people about the house and what they think about her video, because she leaves Navy, takes the kids away. Navy gives her all of the footage and she edits it down into like this tiny little clip, which is then kind of like all that remains, right, of the footage. And she's showing it to people to say, what do you think about this? And would you have any interest, and what are your thoughts? And do you have any theories on what this could mean? While doing this, kind of realizes how much she loves Will and wants to go back to him and get him back again. But we kind of get this view of Will through Karen's eyes, of him and his work and why he did what he did for so long, leaving them and kind of chasing the good in humanity. And it kind of causes her to fall back in love with him and head back to be with him. And people saying that the house is a symbol of like, oh, the womb and a vagina and his mother, and trying to reclaim what he never had, which was a relationship with his mom and maternal stuff. It's how only men went into the hallway and never women, because women understood darkness and understood that there was nothing there to be found, but men had to explore and penetrate and conquer the space and whatnot. I don't know, it's interesting. For as much as I do have aphantasia and as much as I don't see things happen in my head, it's like, it's so descriptive. I'm noticing this time around I have a lot less anxiety and a lot less dissociation with reality this time around reading it. But I remember in the first read just being absolutely disoriented. And this time I'm doing a little bit better with that whole sensation and feeling. I did also do a lot of research on the index. The index indexes every single word, which is not normal for an index. End is in there, so is in there, but is in there, which is not normal for an index. And then things that should be in there but aren't, like camera. They talk about the cameras and the footage that's found on cameras a lot, and the word camera doesn't exist in the index. Like a really strange like nuance to the book is these little tiny details that you wouldn't necessarily look at. Like, who's gonna finish a book and then go page by page through the index to notice that it's weird? But it's weird. Like, everything about this book is weird. So I want to spend a little bit of extra time with the appendix and the exhibits and the index at the end of this book and go through it a lot closer than I did my first read. I'm on page 464. I've been reading today with Poe's album on. Poe is Mark's sister, and she wrote an album for the book that you can play along with the reading of the book, and I screamed. I started listening to it. I was like, I'm gonna listen to a little bit of this album, see if it like enhances the reading experience, yada yada yada. Cover that in the vlog. I showed you a little bit of it earlier. This haunting ringing of a phone, leaving of a message, and then this like eerie, "Are you there?" And then this little kid saying, "Mommy, Mommy." And I had my headphones in, and it's very like surrounding. It's both ears. It's very, I didn't like it. So I took my headphones out and listened to it without that, because screw that. I did listen to the full like hour and however many minute album while reading, and I'm in a part of the book right now where Navy has gone back to the house. Karen has gone back to the house after leaving the house, and the kids are with her mom, and they're going over some of the science and stuff that happened in the house. Like the samples of the walls were from billions of years ago, before the Earth and our solar system was even created. They're dating these samples back to, and saying that it has to be something extraterrestrial, that the samples from inside the house predate the Earth, and that based on how long it took the quarter to drop that they put down the stairwell, that the full like width, that the depth inside the house would be more than the actual like depth of the Earth, the circumference and space within Earth itself. Boggling my mind. And then Navy writes a letter to Karen that basically says that he believes the house is God, like not a god or a metaphor for heaven or hell, but like actually God. There's other people that have said, like on Twitter with the buddy read, that the whole book is supposed to be like a love letter. Whether it's a love letter from Navy to Karen, because he does love her. It's not the healthiest of relationships, but throughout this book you see how much he loves her, and she loves him, because he goes back to the house and Karen follows him back to the house, and he is lost in here, and it's turning into a very Escher-esque situation where everything is downhill, and then things are changing, and he goes to bed with a door here, and then he wakes up and it's in the ceiling, and he has to throw things up and climb up and out, and then everything's shifting and shrinking, and the writing throughout this whole entire portion is like you have to flip the page as the house flips and the space he's in flips. You have to flip the page and continue to read, and it's so immersive, and you feel like you're in it with him, and that as the space shrinks that he's in, the text is shrinking and lengthening, and you're feeling it with him, like that sense of anxiety. Because it talks about the symptoms of being too close to the house, and it does talk about derealization and how you stop realizing what's real and what isn't, which is a lot of what the book does to you too as you read. It does kind of take you in and out of the space as well, which is very strange. And Johnny is really starting to lose it, so we're really kind of in the thick of where everything feels really messed up. With each step Navidson takes, we too grow more and more convinced that we are really looking at a window, and furthermore an open window, which is the first time a window has ever been seen in this hallway, in this space. Doorways offer passages, and windows offer visions, and here's one last chance to behold something beyond the interminable pattern of the wall. Though, as Navidson discovers, there was never a wind, and there was certainly no eye. Climbing out onto a narrow terrace on the other side, Navidson, for the second time during the exploration number 5, confronts the grotesque vision of absence. This time, however, he can do little else but laugh. Well, isn't this unexpected? Navidson chuckles, but as he turns to go back through what was an open window, he finds the window has vanished along with the room, and all that remains is the ash-black slab upon which he is standing, now apparently supported by nothing. Darkness below, above, and of course, darkness beyond. He's now standing on just a floating slab in the space of this house. Do you see this? Like, this is madness. And it's not like, oh, I'm just like casually tabbing things. Like, I have so many annotations. I'm going to keep going. I've got to flip. So here's another example. We read this way. I have to flip the whole book and read this section this direction. So I'm in it for the madness, guys. Okay, here we go. Onto this page. Let's see what we got in store for us. Alright, friends, it is nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. I've cut my own hair, had a mental breakdown over this book, and I'm done for tonight. I'm also done the book. I am at the exhibits section of the book at the very, very end, which I'm going to read through in a little bit more detail, just to see if there's anything that I've missed, but I'm done the official story of the book, and I did read a lot of the end when I flipped back and forth from the footnotes, so I anticipate it's going to be pretty quick tomorrow to finish this one up. Holy cow. I forgot little bits and pieces of it. Like, I forgot that there's a time where Johnny actually goes to like a bar, meets a band who's playing a song called The 5-Minute Hallway, which is one of the songs that Poe wrote for the book, and then they're playing the song, he asks them about the song, and they show him the book. Authored by Zampano, translated and put together by him, and they've read it and they've annotated it. Didn't remember that, like, very meta moment. I didn't remember Navy being rescued by Karen. I didn't remember that he came out and, like, lost an eye and a hand, and like all these other, his shattered hip and everything from being in there for so long. And then I don't remember her having breast cancer and dealing with that. A situation where Johnny was beating up the guy who beat up Lude, who then led to Lude's death. Didn't remember Lude dying in a motorcycle accident. Remembered him dying, didn't remember him dying in a motorcycle accident. And like the description of his death was really, really graphic and disgusting. And there's like a couple different points where I was just like, I don't remember that happening. I don't remember that happening at all. But my initial like annotations for my first read through had it highlighted, so at some point I knew it, just that I didn't recall it. It wasn't like one of the things that stuck out to me about the book. While reading, I had Amber go and check her copy of her book. I went to the website for Mark Z. Danielewski and the House of Leaves, and this forum is so intense and so exhaustive, and they've really picked apart this book into like such detail that I will probably never take it to. I asked Amber to turn to a specific page. There's one person when this page is brought up that says they have an ink spot that looks like a mistake on their page, and it's above the stanza marks. I have a mark at the bottom of the page by the page numbers. Amber has a mark, just a dot, a black dot, to the right of the page at the very, very edge. I don't think that's a printing error if 3 people have this like weird anomaly on the same page, but nobody else in the forum is talking about it. And when this man asked in the forum if anybody else had something on that page, everybody said no. I checked with Amber. We have the same ISBN, we have the same edition, all the information on the book, on the barcodes, everything is the same. I'm going to show you what mine looks like, and then I'm going to check in the live show and see if anybody else has something else on their page, this specific page, specifically page 487. So if you have House of Leaves and you want to go to page 487 and tell me if you have a weird anomaly on your page, let me know. There's this blank stanza with an asterisk. Now on Amber's, right here at the edge, she has a little black dot. No little black dot on mine. But if you come to the bottom of the page, you can see right here under my little tab, there's this strange little red mark. So that's what mine looks like. And chances are it has no meaning. It's such a unique and completely strange, alien, like just mind-altering read. It's very different from anything else that I've ever experienced. Last time I gave it 4 stars because I didn't understand Johnny's perspective. I didn't understand why his story was necessary. And I understand that a lot better after a little bit of reflection, a little bit of time away from the story. And especially, I'm learning it as I read it again, that it really just does lend to your sense of paranoia and not knowing exactly what might happen to you if you keep reading, right? Like, even the intro is like this warning against reading this book. It's not for you. You don't want this. It's going to lend to issues. You're going to have nightmares. It might not start immediately, but it will happen. You're going to become obsessed with this book. It's going to be this thing that you think of. You can't get it out of your mind. It'll haunt you in dark hallways and yada, yada, yada. It's really smart of Mark to have written it this way, and I can respect it as a writer, and I can understand it as a reader with a little bit of distance. It really did make a lot of sense to me. So I don't anticipate giving this less than 5 stars. It is unlike anything I've ever read or will ever read again. No amount of mixed media, like nothing else is ever going to surpass this in terms of like uniqueness. Just ever, I don't think. We're looking at the next day and I finished the book. I don't think you're ever really done with this book, or maybe it's never done with you. I don't really know. But last night I finished my reading around 1 a.m. and I knew that there was a couple parts I wanted to go back and look at, mainly our last big footnote of Johnny, because he goes on this journey and he kind of journals stuff, and I wasn't really sure what was real and what was not. And he is, and I honestly, I couldn't figure out exactly how his story ends or like what happens to him at the end of all of this. There was this really weird passage about a mom taking a kid off of like life support. There was some really strange situations with this man and Kira's fiance, and whether or not he had actually murdered somebody or like followed through with this urge to like take her and dismember her and rape her. And it was weird, and I was like, I don't want that for him. I need to go back and look at it, which is what I just did. Oh, God, I just reached a part of the book and I don't know if it's true or not. I'm going to keep reading, but like I just cried because I think one of the most poignant parts of this book is when you flip forward and you read all the letters from Johnny's mom and you see her care for him. There's such a weird dynamic with Johnny and his mother. They're brilliant and they quote all these brilliant things and they use all these different languages and they have really high functioning reasoning and intelligence, and then you see them do this behavior and just slip into psychosis and you're not exactly sure what's going on with them. In reading through her story, you see this grappling of love and then violence towards her son. Throughout his annotations, you see him talk about his love for her and holding on to her locket and holding on to things from her. And when you look at this book, or Mark says that this whole book is a love letter, you start to wonder towards the end if it's a love letter between Navy and Karen at all, or if it's a love letter from a mother to her son, or a son to a mother. And I didn't think Johnny's story had a love story because of the women that he's been with, but his love story is his story with his mom. And my mind is blown right now because I don't know if this is a part of his descent into like things that aren't real, or if this is legitimate. But this passage, if it's not a part of his psychosis, is going to break me. So I'm just going to share it with you because I feel like it's one of those things that's probably easily missed. And even in the both times that I read this, I didn't highlight it and I didn't annotate it until I went back to it at the end because something was bothering me. So we know that his mom burnt him with oil, that he has scars on his arms from catching this falling hot oil. We know that she was put away and his dad took her away because she tried to strangle him. On page 517, it says, "Her eyes I recall melting with tenderness and confusion. Mommy's gonna be okay, don't worry. But even though my father had his hands on her shoulders, trying as gently as he could to lead her away, I couldn't let go. So she knelt down in front of me and kissed my cheeks and my forehead and then stroked my face. She hadn't tried to strangle me, and my father had never made a sound. I can see this now. I can hear it too, perfectly. Her letter was hopelessly wrong, maybe an invention to make it easier for me to dismiss her. Or maybe something else, I have no idea, but I do know her fingers never closed around my throat. They only tried to wipe the tears from my face. I couldn't stop crying. I'd never cried that much before. I'm crying now, all these years, and now I can't stop. I can't see. I couldn't see then. Of course she was lost in a blur. My poor father taking her from me, forced to grab hold of her, especially when they got to the foyer and she started to scream, screaming for me, not wanting to go at all, but crying out my name. And there it was, the roar, the one I've been remembering. In the end, not a roar, but the saddest call of all, reaching for me, her voice sounding as if it would shatter the world, fill it with thunder and darkness, which I guess it finally did. Is the roaring in the house her screaming for him? Is the house and the darkness and the endless void his loss of his mother? Is that echoing cry in the dark that haunted everybody the voice of a mother being taken from her son? Further on that page, it discusses the fact that, like a bad dream, the details of those 5.5 minutes just went and left me to my future. So, the 5.5 minutes that what? Like his dad was trying to remove the mom from the house? Down the hallway, through the foyer to the door? Which to a small child must have felt like a never-ending hallway that just kept expanding as his mother got further and further away from him, roaring for him. 517. This happens on page 517. The book is over on 528. So are you going to tell me that, like, who wrote the book? Who wrote it? Is it all just him discussing the grief and absence of his mother and that memory that he blocked until a certain point? She still went away, right? Like, she still went to a psychiatric facility. So there was still mental illness in his family. So even if she never hurt him on purpose, she still had issues. So, you know, a lot of that is hereditary. So maybe he also has issues, and maybe that was a part of him closing himself off from the world and working on this book. I'm so confused. There's no bio. There's nothing at the end. The last thing in the book is the poem Norse Tree of Life discussion here at the end, which is an ash tree. Ash Tree Lane is the house. The house is all on Ash Tree Lane. And it's an entrance into, like, a portal to universes. I didn't mark that passage on 517 the first time I read it. I didn't mark it the second time I read it. Something told me to go back and reread that because I didn't think that I had gotten all I needed to from his last footnote. Kind of everything changes. And Johnny's timeline might have the greatest love story of all, which gives an entirely new meaning to his mother's letters. He was in foster care and having problems settling down with new families, probably because he wanted to be with his mother. So did she start discussing abusing him as a way to convince him that it had happened so that he would forget about her and settle down with a foster family? Did it work well enough that he stopped writing to her, which led to her suicide? Did her love for him push him away for his own good and then cause her to spiral till she died? I don't know. I'm going to have to close this vlog out at some point. I don't really know when. I don't know how. Is that how this ends? Just like, I don't know. This is ridiculous. All right, I'm on a thread. In the book, Will Navidson is in the house. He's floating in it. He's falling from inside of it, just endlessly falling. At one point, he stops. He's lighting the book, House of Leaves. He's lighting the pages on fire to try to keep light in the darkness of the house. And it says in the book that there's 710 pages inside the book, House of Leaves. But our copy has 709. not 710. Which means not only is the house bigger on the inside than the outside, but the book inside the book is bigger on the inside than the outside. We have a smaller book than the book in the book. You know, I think it's time for me to put this book to bed. Just spent hours on forums just trying to like figure out if my hypothesis was correct, and it's definitely one of the hypothesi. It's one of the theories about this book is that the entirety of the book exists within his mother's mind, and that every reference for the word house is actually his mother, whose name I forget. It starts with a P. And that's one of the theories. And in the decoded letter to Johnny, we get talks about a stranger and an invasion and yada yada. We know that she was raped by orderlies, and there's some that theorize that Holloway and his violence within the void is representation of that void, the endless vastness of her head, that's where all of this takes place. I don't know. Who knows? My one remaining question as I went back through this last section about Johnny was really like trying to figure out, well, what happened to him in the end? Do we know where he is, or what truly happened at the end of this? Because the last section of his footnote is a story about a child. So I was like, well, that doesn't give me anything to go off of. So I went back through this giant footnote and realized that I made an error. Entirety of these footnotes are taking place in journal entries from 98. And we go from November of 98 to August of 1999. And then after that, back to November of 98. So the last actual dated entry, even though like in order in this book, it's not that way. The actual last entry of this book is when he is a homeless person and he has $3 to his name and he's outside a bar and he hears music inside and he goes in. And there's no cover at the bar that night, and beer or is $1 a beer. A band up on stage, and he spends his last $3 to buy a beer for the band and gets a water for himself, and then he gets a beer on the house because he was the first person to buy the band a drink that night. Then he hears a lyric that says, I live at the end of a 5.5-minute hallway. And he stops and the band comes off stage. They're a band from Philadelphia called the Liberty Bell because they're cracked. Has a discussion with a drummer and he's like, well, where'd you hear that before? And he's like, oh man, like this book is going to change your life. Like you can take a look, but it'll change you. Be careful. And he looks down and the title page says House of Leaves by Zampano with introduction, end notes by Johnny Truant. It's the first edition of the book. And he sees all of their annotations and all of the theories and even lyrics for these songs inside. And he says, I was amazed and shocked and suddenly very uncertain about what I had done. There's no question I cherished the substance in those pages, however imperfect, however incomplete. He returns the book with a thank you, wraps himself up in his brown corduroy coat, and stretched out beneath an old ash tree, resting my head on the earth. So the ash tree, again, representative of Ash Tree Lane, and the house representative of this Norse mythology about this house that is the entrance into this, universe, right? All these different portals and options for the universe. So he rests his head on the earth beneath this ash tree, listening to the music as it continued to break from the bar, until at long last I drifted off to a dream, where I was soaring far above the clouds, bathed in light, flying higher and higher, until finally I fell into a sleep no longer disturbed by the past. And then he describes a little bit of this dream. And the last lines of that entry is, there's time now, plenty of time, and somehow I know it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. So tell me that the last entry he makes is after the book exists, after the first edition's already published, and he sees it come full circle, and he goes out and he rests his head beneath an ashtray and is finally able to sleep after years and years of sleeplessness and dreamlessness because these troubles plagued him. And he's able to rest his head under this ashtray. Tell me he did not die peacefully in his sleep under an ashtray. What is happening? yeah, so then I went onto the threads again, and yes, that's one of the theories, but it's also very open-ended. Did he finally just come to peace within himself, wake up and move on with his life? We don't know. There's no answers. Purposely, there's no answers, and Mark Z. Danielewski is not giving any answers. That's the whole point of this book. Shooketh at the depth of what I have revealed upon a second reread that I just didn't see upon my first read. And that is why I will be switching my rating to a 5-star rating. This is what my book looks like. This is what the tabs and annotations look like. The orange are from my first read through. The green is from my second. This is what it looks like. This is by far and away my most tabbed and annotated book. What a reread. Absolutely mind blown by what the author has been able to accomplish in this novel. And I know that that's like a weird place to end a vlog about a reading, but like I don't know what to tell you. If you've read this book, and I hope you read it along with us and enjoyed the buddy read, I am finishing this early. I'm finishing this before the live show. I can't wait to discuss this with you guys. There's so many ways to interpret this book, and there's so far you can dive into the minutia of this book and the details and the dissection, and it becomes this like haunting thing that just stays with you. I truly think that it's something that you need to just give yourself over to in order to get the absolute most from it. And if that's not a reading experience that you're willing to go on and something that you're willing to do when you're reading, this book is not, you can just read it and it will just read like a book, and that's fine. But if you really let yourself kind of go into it and let that kind of feeling of unease and disassociation with reality happen, you can follow this so far. And I love that I let myself follow it in a different way this time. I'm coming away from this second read with an entirely different perspective of the book than I had the first time I read it. Very different this time around. And I can't wait to talk to you guys and see what you think about your first time reading it or your reread of it and see how you feel. I don't want to impose my thoughts on what happened in the book on anybody else. I want to let everybody kind of form their own opinions. So yeah, that's everything for my House of Leaves reread vlog. Hopefully you guys have come along on the journey. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. I know that there are a ton of different theories and views on this book. This is just mine. This is just what I took away from it while reading it this time. I will have the forum for the book listed down below that I used and referenced a lot during reading, if you're interested in checking that out. If you're just finding me because you are obsessed with this book the way that I am, welcome, hi, hello. I don't always vlog in my pajamas in my bed, but you know. So that's it. That's it for this vlog. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give me a big thumbs up. Click subscribe, click that little notification bell, and I'll see all of you in my next video. Bye, guys.